So I found this quote or poem, or however you want to say it, and it is something that was written in 1793 by a gentleman named Dr. Beilby Porteous, and he was the Bishop of London. And he published this in a publication back then. And this is just an excerpt. One murder makes a villain. Millions a hero. Princes are privileged to kill, and numbers sanctify the crime. Ah, why will kings forget they are men, and men that they are brethren? Why delight in human sacrifice? Why burst the ties of nature that should knit their souls together in one soft bond of amity and love? They yet still breathe destruction, still go on, inhumanly ingenious, to find out new pain for life, new terrors for the grave, artificers of death. Still monarchs dream of universal empire, growing up from universal ruin. And I think he goes on for quite a bit, but I'm going to stop there. So, wow, that made me think of a lot of things that I'm going to try to stuff into this video without making too long. First of all, there is probably my favorite passage of Scripture. In the Pearl of Great Price, in the book of Moses, there is a passage where Enoch is having visions, and he is talking with God, with the Father. And they're watching the earth, and Enoch is being shown the past, the present, the future. He's being shown it from the point of view not so much as events and ideas, but from the people that march through these histories. And one of the things that is still ahead of Enoch is the flood of Noah. The flood hadn't occurred yet. And at one point, God the Father begins to weep. And Enoch is like, "Why are you crying? You're God. Why are you crying?" And the Father says, "These are my children, these are my creations, and I made them to love each other, and I made them to love me. And they hate each other, and they spill their own blood." Which means that they were spilling each other, but they were all one blood, and they didn't know that. And so this caused him to weep because of the love that was missing. And I've always loved that passage because God wasn't weeping because women weren't wearing the right clothes to be modest. He wasn't weeping because people were drinking and smoking. He wasn't weeping because they forgot to go to church. He wasn't weeping for all kinds of things that maybe aren't the best. Well, those things I don't care about either, but I mean, all the things that we think are rules and vices, and we do have to, come to some peace and balance in our life, but he wasn't upset about any of that. He wasn't upset about if people belonged to different ideas, or he wasn't talking about any of that. He just said, why are they killing each other? Why are they killing each other? And in this passage, they also talk about the culmination of history at the very end, where the city of Enoch returns to the earth in this template, in this story. And the culmination of history is this triumph of, not of right, but of love. When we meet again, and I'm not saying this exactly, but when we meet again, we will fall upon each other's necks and kiss each other. And the image is like of just being so excited to meet with someone you're intimate with, and this wonderful, wonderful reunion. And for me, when I read things like this, it's not about, first of all, whether or not it's real or not. It doesn't matter, and that's not what I'm presenting it to you for. It is a template, and it also doesn't matter if it's something that happened in the past, present, or future. It's showing us the alternatives, the one hand or the other hand. It's a image. It's the image of the bloodshed, and then the image of the intimacy that we can have. And we are not choosing that embrace with each other yet, are we? I will put a link where you can read the whole passage. It's just really beautiful. Another thing that I think about is, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about anarchy. I'm going to give it its own series, but I want to suggest to you that the state, and the state can be anything. It can be democracy, so-called. It can be republicanism, so-called. It can be monarchy, so-called. It can be anything you want to call it. But the state is a instrument of violence, because it can only be maintained by actual explicit violence or the threat of implied violence. And it doesn't take very long to understand this, because, for example, if you do not pay your taxes, what will happen to you? You will be put in jail. And you can say this is right or wrong or necessary or whatever. It doesn't matter if you agree with it or you don't agree with it. What I'm just saying is that there's a threat of violence there that is part of the mechanism of the state. And that's what Dr. Porteous is talking about. When one person kills somebody, it's a crime. But when we march off all our soldiers, around the world and kill people, then it's heroism, and it's not necessarily even on the part of the soldiers, although that happens as well. And people who become soldiers are very sincere people. There's some very sincere sentiments there, and it's hard to knock, which it has been made to be hard to say anything against. And I don't want to say anything against soldiers, because, again, they are sincere people who are trying to do a service. But it's the idea that comes from the state that has carefully woven this glorification so that they can use the bodies of young men and women as, targets for other people's bullets. So they can own your bodies. And, there's just, if you look at how the state is set up, it is the instrument that is maintained by violence and that does the most violence. Again, to make a huge thing about this would be too long of a video, but let me just forward that idea, and then if you wish to study that out for yourself and agree or disagree with me, but I want to forward that. And so the alternative becomes to have no state, and then you have to ask yourself how that can be done too, which is not the easiest thing in the world, but it may be worth it. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the tradition of the warrior versus the tradition of the soldier. Again, acknowledging the very sincere sentiments and service of those who are soldiers, but I think that there's not an alternative given. We're not given the alternative of the way of the warrior. We're only given the alternative of the way of the soldier. And so, of course, very sincere people not everybody can change everything all at once. You have to live in the world that you're in. So you go into this paradigm of soldierness. But none of us have learned, except, individuals here and there, of the way of the warrior. And again, that's something that's going to have its own series. And the way of the warrior is, first of all, not just for men, it's for women too. But one of the things, there are a few things that I can mention of the differences of the way of the warrior and the way of the soldier. The way of a warrior is autonomous. He makes his own decisions. And yes, you can work together with other warriors, but it's you make your own decisions. A soldier has to follow orders, or the instrument that it is. The whole army doesn't work. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I'm asking, should it work? Is it something that should be working as well as it has? And so that's just one thing. So and the way of a warrior is actually peaceful. And I think that the way of the soldier can have some peace in it as well, because sometimes we send our soldiers to do like projects after natural disasters and that sort of thing. Nothing is all bad. It's everything's a mix of things. But my point in bringing these things up is to like pierce and tear down the old things that we're thinking and believing, not because not because I want to be angry or against anyone, but because I just want the new world to come. I want to like undo these things. I just want to point them out. Like, is this the only way to do things? And no, it's not. It's not even the best way to do things. And even those who talk about, becoming, we've been sold that participating in the military is a matter of the freedom and the protection of the United States. But even the slightest study into the wars that have taken place over the last 100 years will show that, again, not the soldiers themselves, because I'm sure they believe, but those who are mongering the war are not doing this for freedom or defense. All right? It takes a minimum of study to understand that. This is not a conspiracy theory. War is a business, and it has to have, products and customers and investors, and there's certain kinds of things that the United States government, and it's not even the United States, it's just, I think the word for it these days is the military-industrial complex. And they talk about the interests, not freedom and protection. And nobody has mounted a war against us. This began, the most recent round of propaganda and war began with 9/11. And you can study that out for yourself. And I am not in possession of a whole lot of facts, so I don't even have my own conclusion. But there's enough that caused me to question, and the main thing is nobody has mounted a war against us. Nobody has invaded. If it was someone other than our own government who blew up 2 buildings, they haven't been able to get in since, of course, which we say, okay, it's because of the new laws and the new vigilance, but they never would have been able to before either. They never would have been able to before, unless it was wanted as a touchstone. And the war that was fought after that was not about that, it was about something else. We changed villains. We went from Osama bin Laden, and then we moved to Saddam Hussein. It wasn't even the same idea, but most of us didn't notice. And I'm not saying these are saints, okay? But if the United States government, or whatever you want to call it, wanted Saddam Hussein dead, they could have put a bullet in between his eyes with some special forces, but that's not what they did. They went in and pretty much obliterated the infrastructure of a country. Totally unnecessary for freedom and defense, but it served some other purposes, I'm sure. And this is a very different kind of video that I'm making. But and when I talk about history, I will talk about more facts. But right now, I'm just bringing it up. And if it pierces you, I don't want you to get, scared or even angry or something. That's not going to help. But I just want you to see. I want you to start seeing what you can see. If you're so inclined, I actually don't worry so much sometimes about the larger world, because I don't feel like there's anything I can do about it. The thing that I can do is to live in my life where I'm at and raise my children and love them, not be at war with my children, not be at war with the neighbors around me. So I don't really feel like there's a reason for me to be, gloomy about it all the day. And if I can become stronger, then I will do something. I have a friend who's a refugee. I have a lot of friends who are in that situation, but there's one that I've been helping him write letters lately. And so that's what I can do. I can't solve his whole problem, but I can write letters. And so, I lend myself to that. So it's very, I don't have power, you don't have power. But one of the powers that we could maybe take up is to see. And not just listen to the story that we're given, and that there cannot be a justification for the wars that we're doing. Not the ones in the big world, and not the ones even with our neighbors. And return good upon evil. And I just want everybody to be alive and happy. And if we need to move to defense, I think the way of the warrior and a true understanding of anarchy, not the misunderstandings that are out there. And the true understanding of anarchy is also called the beloved community, which is something that I'll talk about. So I actually apologize for this video. I am going to post it, but it's kind of a bunch of questions and indictments without, a whole lot of going through evidence and that sort of thing, because that's not really how I'm presenting this this kind of video. But going back to, people have been talking about this since 1793, going back to this quote. I am not the first person to think about this, and I won't be the last. One murder makes a villain, but millions a hero. And so apparently we've been doing this since 1793, and we've been doing this a lot longer than that. So this isn't even just about, the United States or something. It's somebody is always going to pick this stupidity up, this human sacrifice up, and do it, and why? And the thing that I quoted from before Noah's flood from Enoch, they were doing it back then. Okay, so why? Just don't buy into it. Don't think that there's a reason for it. Okay. If you've listened to this whole thing, you're a super fan, and I love you. I love you all. Okay, see you later. Bye.